It was a Tuesday evening, one of those calm, unremarkable evenings that felt like the entire world was taking a collective breath. I was in my living room, folding laundry, the kind of mindless task that lets you zone out. Netflix was playing in the background, the usual Tuesday night routine after a long day managing the IT department at Henderson & Associates. I had my white polo shirt and jean shorts on, standard after-work uniform. It was my house, my sanctuary. Or so I thought. The doorbell rang. I could hear it from across the room, ringing like a fire alarm. Not a polite, friendly ring, but a frantic, persistent hammering of the doorbell. It felt urgent, like the whole universe was trying to get my attention. I shuffled over to the door, half expecting to see a neighbor with a question about a lawn mower or a misplaced package. But when I opened it, I was greeted with a scene I wasn't prepared for. Standing on my porch, like some kind of suburban royalty, was Brenda Hutchinson, the HOA president. Now, I know what you're thinking. HOA president? How bad could it be? Trust me, it's worse than you think. She had that look. The tight, perfect smile. The "I'm about to make your life miserable" smile. Her bleached blonde hair was pulled back so tightly, I thought her scalp might tear. The navy blazer? Couldn't be more formal, unless she was about to give a TED talk on how to make everyone else feel small. Behind her was her husband, Officer Rick Hutchinson, bald, red-faced, and wearing a police uniform that clearly didn't fit. And then there was their son, Brandon, who was holding a slice of pizza like he was about to declare war on it. But it wasn't the pizza that caught my attention. It was the luggage. 3 matching, expensive bags were sitting behind them, bags that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. And as I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing, Brenda spoke up. "Jerome Washington," she said, flipping through a clipboard. "We need to talk." "Good evening to you, too, Mrs. Hutchinson," I replied, keeping my voice casual as I leaned against the doorframe. I wasn't in the mood for whatever this was. "What can I do for you on this fine Tuesday evening?" Her eye twitched, but she didn't let it show. She was a professional at this game. "There's been a family emergency," she continued. "My sister's house in Tampa was damaged in that storm last week, and she and her family need somewhere to stay while repairs are being made. Since you have the largest house on Maple Street, the HOA board has decided that you'll be hosting them for the next month." I blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. "I'm sorry. What now?" Brenda pushed forward, her fake smile not even breaking. "It's not really a request, Jerome. You live alone, and this is a community emergency. You're the only one with adequate space. The HOA board has made the decision." Now, I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but my blood pressure was definitely starting to rise. I stayed calm, though. This was my home, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even an HOA president and her cop husband, push me around. "I think you're misunderstanding something," I said slowly. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. My signature is on the mortgage. And nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to decide who lives here except me." Brenda's smile faltered, but she quickly snapped it back. She wasn't used to being told no. "Jerome, I think you're making this harder than it needs to be. According to HOA Bylaw 247B, in cases of community emergency, residents with adequate space are required to provide temporary housing assistance." I cut her off. "Mrs. Hutchinson, I've read every single one of those bylaws. Bylaw 247B refers to providing temporary parking space for residents whose driveways are being repaired. There's nothing in there about forced housing arrangements." Before Brenda could respond, her son, Brandon, spoke up, pizza grease on his lips. "Dad, just arrest him already. He's being uncooperative." Officer Rick stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt like he was the sheriff of this town. "Now, Jerome," he said, his voice low and condescending, "you don't want to make this more difficult than it needs to be. My wife is trying to help family, and you're standing in the way of that." At that moment, the audacity of it hit me. Here was a grown man, a police officer, threatening me because I wouldn't let his family move into my home. But what really pissed me off was the look in their eyes. They saw me as an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved, not a person with rights. "Officer Hutchinson," I said, taking a deep breath, "I'm going to need you to explain exactly what law I'm breaking by refusing to let strangers live in my house." Rick's face turned redder, and he stepped closer, clearly trying to intimidate me. "Don't you dare record me," he growled, reaching for my phone. I'm recording this because this is my property, I said, stepping back, keeping my phone visible. I have every right to record what happens on my own porch. That's when Brenda made her move. Jerome, she said, her voice sweet but cutting. Your attitude is exactly why we've had so many complaints about you. Mrs. Patterson said your music was too loud last weekend. The Thompsons said your car was crooked in the driveway. And let's not forget that vegetable garden of yours, the one you planted without submitting any landscaping approval forms. I almost laughed. Almost. Mrs. Patterson, an 87-year-old woman, had complained about my loud music, which was really just a few birds chirping outside. The Thompsons? They had only ever spoken to me once, and that was to passive-aggressively mention how my property values were apparently hurting theirs. And as for the vegetable garden, it was my yard, my tomatoes, and my peppers. But Brenda wasn't done yet. So let me get this straight, I said, looking directly at Officer Rick. Your wife is threatening me with HOA violations because I won't let your family live in my house for free, and you're standing there in uniform backing her up. Does that about sum up the situation? The look they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about family emergencies. It was about power, control, and the assumption that I would just fold under pressure because of who they were and who I was. You have until tomorrow morning to reconsider, Brenda said, her voice suddenly cold. After that, I'll have no choice but to pursue all available options to ensure community compliance. As they left, Brandon gave me one last smug look. Nice house, he said. It'll be even nicer when we're levying in it. I stood there, stunned, watching them pack up their luggage into their SUV. That's when I realized war had just been declared. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of aggressive pounding on my door. Not the polite knock you expect when you're receiving a VY cider, but the kind of banging that makes you think your house is about to collapse. My heart sank, and I could feel the anxiety creeping in as I threw on the same white shirt and jean shorts from last night. I knew exactly who was at the door, and I could already feel the adrenaline starting to pump through me. I approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. Sure enough, it was Officer Rick. And this time, he wasn't alone. There were two backup officers standing behind him, looking awkward and out of place. I could also see Brenda's pristine white SUV parked in my driveway with her, and Brandon watching from the window like they were watching a movie. They were ready for the show. Jerome Washington, Rick bellowed, his voice loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Open this door immediately. We have a warrant for your arrest. The blood drained from my face. A warrant for what? Domestic terrorism, he said, his face twisted into a grin that sent chills down my spine. Making terrorist threats and harassment of a public official. What? Domestic terrorism? The last time I checked, refusing to let people move into my house wasn't a criminal act. My brain was racing to make sense of this, but before I could speak, Rick grabbed his handcuffs and advanced on me. The last thing I needed was to escalate the situation. I slowly opened the door, keeping my hands visible. Officer Hutchinson, there seems to be some sort of mistake, I said, trying to stay calm even though my heart was racing. What exactly am I being arrested for? No mistake, Rick said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Yesterday evening, you threatened to burn down my family's home and harm my wife and child. We have witnesses. I froze. What? That was an absolute lie. I could see the other two officers, one young, one older, exchanging uncomfortable glances. One of them, Officer Williams, stepped forward. Sir, we're going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back, he said quietly. I couldn't believe it. I never threatened anyone. All I did was refuse to let them live in my house. But Rick wasn't done. The witnesses say they heard you screaming about burning houses down. Mrs. Patterson heard you, and the Thompsons saw you making threatening gestures. I stood there in disbelief. They'd fabricated everything. I knew what was happening. They had planned this. Brenda had called their elderly neighbors and fed them a story, and now Rick had used his badge to make it official. They were turning a simple refusal into a criminal case, and there was no way I could stop it. I was handcuffed and shoved into the back of a patrol car. The ride to the station was surreal. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. All because I said no. Because I refused to let these people invade my home. In the back of the patrol car, I could hear Officer Williams quietly saying to me, Look, man, I don't know what really happened, But something about all this doesn't sit right. Rick's been talking about teaching a lesson for weeks. Weeks? This whole thing had escalated over a single evening, yet Rick had been planning it for a while. The reality started sinking in. This wasn't just about a family emergency. This was about power, about control. At the station, I was processed like a criminal: fingerprints, mug shots, the whole deal. They took everything, including my phone. I was given one phone call. I used it to contact Marcus Chun, a criminal defense attorney I'd met at a networking event. He remembered me and agreed to take my case, but warned me that the charges were serious. 2 weeks in county lockup. 2 weeks of isolation, frustration, and anger. I shared a cell with all kinds of characters, none of whom were concerned with the fact that I had been falsely arrested. But during those 2 weeks, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a VY Tim anymore. I was about to make things right. When Marcus finally got me out, it was like stepping back into a world I didn't recognize. My house, once a place of peace, now felt hostile. But I wasn't going to let them win. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to back down. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I built the case. We gathered EVY Denke, inter-VY EU'd neighbors, and uncovered the truth. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a conspiracy. Rick had used his position to intimidate me, and Brenda had orchestrated it all through the HOA. We were ready to fight back. Then came the breakthrough. Officer Williams, the young officer who had seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation, agreed to meet with us. He pro-VY'd us with crucial EVY Denke of Rick's past misconduct and abuse of power. It was the nail in Rick's coffin. The next move was strategic. Marcus and I filed a federal CIVYL rights lawsuit against both Rick and Brenda Hutchinson, the HOA, the police department, and the city. The lawsuit wasn't just about me. It was about holding them accountable and ensuring that no one would ever have to face this kind of abuse again. The media picked up on our case quickly, and soon, my story was everywhere. National news outlets covered the lawsuit, and people began to take notice. The attention was exactly what I wanted. Rick and Brenda's actions were now under the public microscope. But what really surprised me was the outpouring of support. People from all over the country reached out, sharing their own experiences with HOA harassment and police misconduct. I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been silenced by authority figures. By the time the trial came around, the pressure on Rick and Brenda was unbearable. Brenda's HOA presidency crumbled under the weight of her own corruption, and Rick was suspended pending an internal investigation. His career as a police officer was over. And then, the worst part for them it all came crashing down in one final, public humiliation. Rick and Brenda had to make public apologies as part of the settlement. I sat in that courtroom, watching them squirm under the weight of their own lies. It was hard to watch, but it felt good. I had fought for justice, and now, they were finally going to pay for what they had done. The fallout didn't stop there. Rick lost everything: his job, his reputation, his family. His son, Brandon, was expelled from multiple schools, and even the local community turned on him. They couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. Brenda faced criminal charges for embezzlement and was banned from any future HOA involvement. The Hutchinsons had lost everything, and I had won. But the VY Tory wasn't just personal. It sparked nationwide change. Police departments across the country implemented new training and oversight policies. HOAs were forced to reform, ensuring that residents could no longer be bullied or harassed the way I was. As I walked away from the courthouse, I realized the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But I knew one thing for sure: some people just don't take no for an answer. And when you stand up to bullies like Rick and Brenda Hutchinson, you can make a difference. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to fight back against abuse of power? Share your story in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. The more we talk about it, the stronger we become.